I'm a Democrat. I want to see democracy work. I am an economist by heart. I want to see us. Hey, we are wealthy, man. We are wealthy underground.
Yes.
I want to see a country where truly, when we talk about one South Africa, there are no people left out. I'm sick and tired of living in a country where you travel here in Parktown, you see a different level of wealth, and then you leave straight from here, and you can go just down the road from here and see absolute poverty. That's not the South Africa I want to see. The South African problem is, what do you do with the many that are left out? And so I want to build a country upon which all citizens can prosper, regardless of the color of their skin. I want to live in a country where women can walk around freely and safely without worrying that they are going to be violent. I want to live in a country where a child who is born does not get born into hunger, and that the circumstances of their birth will determine what kind of education they get.
Hi guys, welcome to Marcelo Simon show. Today it's such an honor to be joined by an entrepreneur, a politician, and a pastor. Today we are joined by the none other than President Mmusi Maimane. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks my brother. Good to see you.
Yes, it's such an honor, sir, to have you here. Sir, at the age of 4-6, have you always realized or you want to be in politics?
Politics wasn't my first love as an industry itself.
Yes,
I think when you're a South African who grows up in the townships of Soweto, you realize that you yourself may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you.
Yes.
Because the struggle is happening. You become conscious of injustice quickly, because we grew up, because I lived in Dobsonville, our nearest town, quote unquote, was Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Which meant that you needed to, when you arrive in Brotherhood, you suddenly realize, oh, no, man, you are less than.
I don't belong.
It's a place of blacks versus whites, blankesni. And you also realized I grew up in a township where there was a lot of conflict between IFP, ANC at the time, and other formations. You know, we grew up with APLA, so many other formations. But the issue at core was you needed to know Zulu.
Yes.
If you are going to make it. And I didn't live far from a hospital. So violence was a part of society.
As I know.
So when eventually you become conscious what the broader struggle is about, you realize you're already engaged, because naturally society is not functioning the way it's supposed to. But lastly, I was educated in a Catholic primary school. The lady who was working with me was the Catholic nun called Sister Christina Motlou. Now, Sister Christina Motlou was a black consciousness activist. And he taught me at the time to say, to be black is beautiful.
Yes, black consciousness.
But he taught me at the time that there was a dignity about being black. So I say all of that to say, there was a lot of a faith dynamic, being Catholic, growing up Catholic. There was a social dynamic as the politics of culture and society. And there was a grander political issue. So I never thought I'd be in government, if I'm honest. It just never crossed my mind. I always just thought we must fight for what is right. That as you are living in these streets and you think something is wrong, do something about it. That was the most basic thing. So I never thought I'd be a politician in the title sense. But I've always thought to myself, if something is wrong, we must fix it.
Always involved in community activities.
Always involved as an activist. It doesn't matter where. I was a student here. I did my master's program at the School of Governance. When there were issues with, at the time we had some lectures, there were problems. Something is not right, let's do something about it.
Yes.
So you see the mistake we always make is to think of politics and politicians as a position. And we fail to realize that purpose precedes everything. Why do you want to do this thing? Today, even if I was running a business, even if I was running a church,
which you are running,
whatever I was doing,
yes,
you must continuously fight for the people who are left out. When you walk out of here and you find students sleeping on the side of the street here, you are not doing politics. You are fighting for what is unjust because your God says it's not right that there are students outside here. Before we even think what party, we must think about justice and purpose. The mistake we all make is to assume everything is really about positions.
I always say, everything in our life is politically inspired and everything is influenced by politics. Someone might say, I came here to study, but you'll find that there are political influences that are trying to shut you down because you look a certain way, you're from a certain area, you speak a certain way. So I always say, encouraging us as young people to say, let us be involved in activism. Doesn't matter which party you want to register under, but as long as we are active in doing something that benefits us. And saying that said, we have these assumptions or belief or view to say DA is for white people. Why did you, as a township black man, to say I want to join DA and fight for the struggle of my people?
At the time of consideration, right, I was living in Brotherhood at the time. I went to an informal settlement. And when I got to this informal settlement, it was 14 years into democracy. Keeping in mind I grew up under the ANC. I realized, no, these people, now my house has 4 toilets.
Yes.
Something is not right about that. The material conditions, they are not correct. So if the struggle before 1994 was a struggle for political rights, the struggle post-1994 was about governance that delivers economic rights for people and social conditions. So my politics, in the formal sense of the word, were never inspired by ideology. They were inspired by governance. Because today, when we ask what's wrong with South Africa, don't say white people, black people. What's wrong with South Africa is that South Africa is misgoverned. It's almost as though when my grandmother gave me the name Mmusi, Nasari, Roma, let's go govern. So that we fix the material conditions of people. So at the time, I then went back to the ANC and said to them, in fact, I remember having this conversation right here in this campus with then Chris Malegan, who was the economist for COSATU. I said to him, I want to now engage formal politics.
Party politics.
How do we do that? Because people don't eat ideology. There's material benefit to politics. And we had a run around, I engaged the ANC, I tried to figure out, when I judged the DA, I didn't judge it by the color of its skin, I wanted to judge the content of its content. And I wanted to understand what they were doing. And at the time, they were producing to varying levels, at least a veneer, an outward perception of good governance. So when I joined the DA, I wanted to bring that good governance. And when I sit here today, I can look at its content and the content of its character later. But I still think that we need a party in South Africa that isn't going to just lead us by vivering and sloganeering. But really, why are we not showing good governance? If I sat here today, I say to you, and I know some of them, there are many black South Africans who are excellent at governance. We must produce more of those. Because what we cannot afford, for you and I, my brother, we cannot afford for the face of incompetence to be black, for the face of corruption to be black, for the face of poverty to be black. We have to show blackness is also about excellence in governance. So part of what I was trying to do inside the DA was to bring back that sense of dignity that eventually said, people are not competent because they are white. They are competent because they are competent. Let's judge the character of a human being. And I've never been one who wants our politics to be a contestation between black parties and white parties. And I'm afraid there are many political formations that want to do that. Today we now have a colored party, a white party, black party, Afrikaner party, Zulu party. That's not the future. Because what happens to you if but you think Motswana is governing better in that party? You will be stopped from voting from that party because your language doesn't connect. But that is the very essence of tribalism. We have to produce a governance framework that transcends race, class, gender, tribalism. So Mmusi Maimane is going to be one of those leaders in this country that when I lead, you must not say he's leading because he's a black man. You must be a black man who leads all races, all tribes. And they must all respect you because of the competence you bring in governance. And if there's a testimony about what I was doing inside the DA, black and white alike will respect the fact that I never stood there and said, I'm less than because I'm black. I'm competent. I know my job. I do my job. And I lead. Black, white, Indian, colored. We must lead.
And looking back at the years that you have been in DA, what are some of the things whenever you are sitting, you're like, yeah, Mmusi, you did well. That's your legacy.
When I left the DA, 50% of the caucus was black. Because I wanted to bring a diverse organization. When I left, the DA was governing in more municipalities than ever before. We're governing in Gqeberha, in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, in Cape Town. More than half of the budget of municipalities was governed by the DA. When I left, we were starting to grow in communities, urban and rural. So we were on the growth trajectory. And certain people felt they were jealous of that. Because when we suffered some of the electoral losses in 2019, for Afrikaners who started to move towards the Freedom Front Plus, because you'll remember, they literally left the DA and went to the Freedom Front Plus. There were some who were saying, oh, you see, we are losing our base. And then they wanted the DA back. And I said to them, there's no ways I'm going to sit here and lead a party that is only interested in Afrikaners. We must be here for Afrikaners, but not only for Afrikaners. We must be here for Zulus, but not only for Zulus. We must be here for Tswanas, but not only for Tswanas. Because we are here for all South Africans. And the moment you say you are only existing for a particular race, for a particular tribe, then you are not building one South Africa. That's why when I left, I wanted to go build one South Africa. Because the DA stopped becoming that. It started to become a minority party. And then I said, it is against the dictum that says, when we have truly triumphed and we have built freedom, there shall be no minorities or majorities. There shall be a people.
In closing the DA part, looking back at the work that you did, you're saying that 50% in governance were black people, the majority governments were the municipalities were led by DA. Do you think the DA used you to reach the black community?
You know, it's a dangerous question, Robert. Because when you say who uses who, you are confirming racism. And you are denying agency of people. And you are making an allegation that says you are available to be used. It's never the case. Never the case. When I came into the DA, I had a project I was working on. And it was what I believed. And it was what was happening. Because you as a leader carry a vision. When people reject that vision, in an organization, you can't have two visions. That's called division. And I wouldn't want to sit for division. So therefore, it then became a question of saying, I don't serve that vision. This is my vision. My vision came at a price to the DA. Because there were some people inside the DA who were like, this guy is attracting black South Africans. Because if the DA wanted to use me, it would be to placate whites. Because that's their project now. But I wasn't there to do that. I was there to challenge, not as an antagonism to white people, but as an antagonism to the idea of whiteness in its entirety. Because if you bring that concept on the table, you then tend to assume all things that are good are white, all things that are brilliant are white. I've written a book called Dare to Believe, inherently because I wanted to address this issue. I don't resent the DA, but I believe we must live in a South Africa. This is what my project is, my brother. I'm married to a white South African. We have mixed race children. I'm going to build a country that works for all people, black, white, Indian, and color. And if there are parties, in the same way as I think the DA is wrong in its project, I also think there are parties, when a party says we are only for Zulus, it's wrong. When a party says we are only for coloreds, it is wrong. Because then we will stop having democracy, we will have demography. And what is called demographic eventuality, where you say, well, actually, let's stop counting the votes. Let's look at the census results, because those are the results of an election. If the ANC was to become just a black party, it would be a problem because it departs from the vision of people like Nelson Mandela and why it was formed in the first place. That's why Tata could confidently say, I reject both dominance of black and white. Because he understood philosophically that the future of society must be one where all citizens are created equal. I am a Christian. I can't hide the fact that God made men in their own image. Whether that person is black, white, Indian, or colored, they are made in the image of God. So to be racist is to actually hate God, the very essence of it. So to me, my brother, my Christianity compelled me to fight against racism. And my Christianity drives my politics today that say all men are created equal.
In the image of God.
And ultimately, we must build a society upon which all men can experience equality. That's what I'm about.
So right now, as a country, I call it like this is a tough time for South Africa. We have so many forces that are attacking us, one of which happens to be the Expropriation Act. So many people are panicking in the US, the likes of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. When they hear the name Expropriation Act, they think white people are losing land. They say white people, they are confiscating land of white people. That's how they describe it. What are your thoughts on the act?
Firstly, the Expropriation Act, as it's put now, was written to align itself with the Constitution. It does give certain categories of land that can be expropriated for public use. The fear that people have is the age-old fear where the fears, the hopes of one becomes the fears of another. The hopes of one race to be able to gain land become the fears of another race that land will be taken away. But to address that, you needed leadership, because you need leadership that says, here's what our shared objectives are, black and white. Because the danger we face, my brother, is to respond to the US without dealing with the domestic crime. Expropriation is a law that every government all over the world has.
Yes, yes.
To expropriate land for public use is part of the world. Everyone has it. I bet you the US has expropriation within their constitution. Three things must happen for that law to work: public trust and public leadership. Because people must know you are not expropriating land so that you can be corrupt, which is what happened with land reform and land restitution, by the way. Because there are a number of projects that were restituted or where there was a practice of land reform, but you discover at the end of it is that it's money being funneled through. It goes back to the farmer who owns the land and the community is not empowered. The second issue is shared economic objectives. It is in the interest of all South Africans that you cannot have an enclave of wealth and a sea of poverty. I would tell white South Africans who are here that they are as much a part of this country as any other, but they must realize that along with the rich in this country, black and white, that it is not helpful to have the masses sitting out there landless.
Yes.
You need assets to develop. I didn't have money. I grew up without money. But you know what helped me? Was owning a flat. That flat I was able to sell, do this, do that, trade against it, do this. You know what took me to school? Was when my parents were able to get a title deed and they were able to go to the bank to say, get a loan for this one. No, asset base is important. And so people mustn't reject the idea of land reform and land restitution and make it a fear. It must be a hope that more people can be asset rich because we create stability of the society in that regard. And then the third is public efficiency, which is the idea of a government that works. Many of these things are held back. If I came to you, my brother, and you own a farm in the Free State, let me assume you are a white farmer. I say to you, in fact, let me use a different example, the Northwest. You are a white farmer who lives in the Northwest. I come to you, I say, listen, because the law explains that nil can be a value, but that must be determined by the courts, which means you will get compensated. As the president, which I agree with him, by the way, where he says forced removals will never happen. It can't happen. So now I come to this farmer. I say to this farmer, look, we need your land for public use. We want to build an airport in the Northwest. Do you not think it is in the interest of that farmer we determine the right value to say for the purpose of public good, we expropriate the land at this value and we build an airport which will be to the benefit of all. But you need a government that is able to direct economic activity. If it's just expropriation in jail, of course people are going to be fearful and they are going to create narratives that it's blacks versus whites, it's corruption, it's this. A lot of it has to do with leadership, public efficiency, and public trust. We need those things. Otherwise, any law, expropriation is one. Tomorrow someone pronounces on NHR, there will be a similar fight. Tomorrow we talk about Bella, we say it's about shutting down Afrikaans schools. All of these things are because of fears that have not been addressed because of leadership. You need leadership. You need to show people that to be a South African isn't to be black, isn't to be white, it is to be a South African. Which means my interests, the interests of blacks, the interests of whites are shared. So let us not create the impression that essentially it is a game of robbing one against the other or putting one against the other. Because believe you me, if the expropriation bill goes wrong, it's the blacks who are going to suffer the most. Because they are the most in the country. So learn how this thing works in its long run. The reason we have title in the Constitution was because where your parents and your forebears own land was dispossessed, now they want that land back. It's so that they can own it in their own rights. Not so that it can go back to the state, not so that it can be handled in corruption, so that they can own it in their own right. Let us make sure we do that. Because if you create laws that tomorrow there will be another tribe that will arise and it will begin to continue the cycle. Today, you and I make it easy, black versus white. But trust me, tomorrow, or we could really go back to my earlier conversation, it could be Zulus versus Tswanas. You can keep a cycle of one race oppressing another. That is why you must reject black dominance and you must reject white dominance. And fight for ideals that make sure all citizens can have shared goals. And when you expropriate land, it is good for all of us. And that's why I would invite South Africans who are fearful of this issue to say, don't fear this bill, or don't fear, of course, there could be problems with it, but fear instability that is born out of this fact that too many people are lingering in poverty and too few are wealthy. If we keep Santin and Alex, let's take away race out of it. There are black people who live in Santin, black people who live in Alexander. If you don't address Alexander from a land point of view, from a title point of view, from an economic development point of view, trust me, that will create conditions where these ones in Santin will never live in peace. So if you want peace in this country, sort out the question of asset hunger. Land is an asset. Shareholding in state-owned enterprises can be an asset. There are multiple things. Because you may not want land, my brother.
I do. No.
You might grow up and say,
I do.
I actually just want shareholding because I'm never going to live in South Africa. Hey, maybe you might want to go live in Botswana, but you want to own shares. That might be a different asset class. The future must not be what always the Marxists sometimes describe the means of production as only land. There can be other means of production. So we must think about this thing carefully, about what future we want for all of our citizens.
So I read the Senate's letter. 4 senators in the US wrote a letter to Donald Trump. And some of the things that they mentioned was South Africa taking Israel to court, yes, and mentioning the issue of land. And when you analyze everything in it, do you think, sir, the reason why the US is pulling out financial assistance in the US aid and also kind of boycotting to come for these meetings that are currently happening, whereby foreign ministers are in the country for the G20 meetings? Do you think the US is a way to say, okay, South Africa is trying to do this, putting us in the spotlight or putting Israel in the spotlight. Now it's for time for us to pay back, to hit back at them. It's not only about the act, the land act thing.
What do we believe as a society? South Africa has always said that it stands for a two-state solution. Why persecute one over another? What is happening? Look, South Africa must think through these things in terms of what is our strength. Our strength has always been in mediating. Our strength has always been non-aligned. Except in this Israel-Palestine issue, we are aligned. So we must deal with our own domestic issues as a start. The US can exert its own power, its own pressure. And I happen to think that we have to say to ourselves, one, there is no land that's been taken here illegally. That's not true. Two, there's no genocide that's taking place.
No one is
words, you must be careful how you use words. Because when you throw away a word like genocide, you are implying a whole lot of people have been killed. Rwanda suffered a genocide.
They were quiet at first, the US.
When you have a situation where a murder takes place in a farm, a murder takes place in a township, we must be careful not to suddenly say the murder in the farm is the beginning of a genocide. Murder is murder. And we have far too many murders in this country. I say that to mean also, in this country of ours, Jewish South Africans are part of our country, have contributed to the struggle in this country. I don't believe that it is in the interest of our government to persecute them in the country. They're as part of South Africa, as our Muslim brothers and sisters who are in the country. So I still hold the view to keep a two-state solution. I don't agree with everything Benjamin Netanyahu says. I disagree with him. I disagree with him in person. But I certainly think that there must be a better negotiated settlement between the broader Middle Eastern community and that of Israel. But denying the existence of Israel as a state is also wrong. So those who say it must be from the rivers to the sea presume the eradication of the state of Israel. And I don't agree with that. I agree on a two-state solution. I agree of a ceasefire. I agree that all hostages must be returned. And I agree that at the end of the day, we must deal with what is going on in Palestine in terms of occupations, restorations, and making sure supplies go in there. That's our position. And therefore, we must play a role that achieves that. I'm not sure the ICJ case will achieve that. And more crucially, I think that we as a country must continue to play a mediating role, but also focus on our domestic citizens, our people. We need to build a South Africa here.
So, you as politicians, CIC, Julius Malema, President Ramaphosa, John Steenhuisen, and others, you disagree with a lot of things when it comes to politics. But that doesn't mean you guys are enemies. You guys go to inaugurations of other countries together. You guys attend other ceremonies, even in the country. Even in parliament, I see videos of you guys laughing together, showing that brotherhood and leadership, love and understanding. Why is it whenever someone within these leaders of our communities, this parliamentarian, is being attacked by someone outside the country, you are not defending each other publicly? The reason why I'm asking that, when Elon Musk posted on Twitter, he's saying that he's suggesting that CIC Julius Malema be named an international criminal. And I expected a lot of you as leaders to say, he's not saying those things. That video that he posted, it's an old video, to say, we are not divided as a country. We might disagree with political values and political whatever that we disagree with, but we can't allow one of our own being persecuted like this.
That's a fair comment. I take it. Julius Malema and I have worked together. I consider him a brother and a friend. I certainly don't agree that he should be classed as a terrorist. Again, words matter. When you start to throw words around, he has a political view I don't agree with. He's fighting he believes in certain things I don't agree with. But that doesn't make him an enemy. And we have collaborated together on certain things when we worked on marches against President Zuma. But we've disagreed on many things when we talk about nationalization of state assets. I don't agree with him on that. That's why we will never be one party in this sense. But you make a point that there should have been a better collective response about saying that's not the case, and I'll certainly give expression of my views on this issue. But when the opportunity was right, when I felt an injustice was being committed against him, even here domestically, I've certainly stood up in that. Even in Parliament, he can testify to the fact that there were times where the EFF were being ill-treated. And I spoke up. I spoke up against that issue. So maybe on this one, maybe not. But I think that where we've agreed, and I've shared my views, Where we've disagreed, I've disagreed with.
When you saw the postponement of the budget speech, sir, what first came into mind?
Chaos. As you see, we are being plunged into a timeline chaos by the disorganization of the GNU. The lack of goals. When you say you want to build infrastructure, you want to keep the lights on, you want to eradicate corruption, you want to fix crime, all of these things cost money. You then budget accordingly. In simple terms, all you do when you are a state, politics is the distribution of resources. Kanti, why do you enter into politics and never discuss the budget? And we've all known that South Africa was running a 5% deficit year on year. That was common cause. It's not a secret. So where did parties like the DA think this money was going to come from? So a 2% VAT hike is a crime because it is a political substitute for facing difficult decisions. And the difficult decisions are reducing the cabinet, moving the troops back from the DRC, thinking hard about what grants you want to keep because the COVID grant still continues. And I knew the day the president announced that grant, you will never be able to stop it.
Yes.
Never. It's going to be permanent, that thing. Which means you have to fund it. Or you have to face the voters and say, we brought this thing on for COVID. And then look at other things that you can help the poor. But you can't tax your way to prosperity. Neither can you substitute job creation for welfare. Say, well, people are not going to work, so we'll just give them welfare. Can't be. So to me, when I saw that budget postponement, I realized at the time that clearly the GNU had partners who failed to engage on the most crucial aspect of governance, which is the budget.
Do you think, say, as a country, after COVID, we are really, really struggling? As a country, is it the right time for us to increase the tax, or should we focus on trying to rebuild the economy or building opportunities?
It's a bad idea to increase tax. Tax does not, if you increase tax, it's 2 percentage points. You run a 60% social wage bill, which means that in essence, you are funding for the SRD grant. That's all you are doing. And worst of all, you are asking everybody to increase the cost of goods progressively. So energy is not in the zero-rated basket, which means the cost of energy is going to go up. The cost of transport is going to go up. These are things that affect poor people. These are things that affect all of us. We will all suffer at a 2% hike. When you start to increase taxes, you have already conceded that you can't grow the economy. We need an economic growth plan for 5%. Let me give you my view. My view is this, is that our growth strategy must be infrastructure and logistics driven. Infrastructure, I would immediately look at building some form of rail infrastructure between Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Northwest, and the Free State. Why? It does two things. You attract capital towards infrastructure, which means you can bring public-private partnerships. Secondly, transport nodes themselves create in spaces economic activity. Think about the Mall of Africa. You have now the Mall of Africa and Midrand developing. Why? Because we put a Gau train station there. You put a Gau train station, you create economic activity around it. You also lessen the burden of people traveling towards economic opportunities, which means people can get there easily. But thirdly, you create tourism. Because I don't know which province you are from, my brother.
Limpopo.
You are from Limpopo.
International under Elias Mtswaledi.
Have you ever seen the tourism in Limpopo?
No, not where I'm from. The only tourism happens that side of Polokwane. They come to Snake Park. They go to Snake Park, Peter Mokaba Stadium. They go to SABC.
Now, I am a Kaizer Chiefs supporter.
Yes.
I said. But Chiefs play at Peter Mokaba. I'll never go watch Chiefs at Peter Mokaba. Because I'm not going to sit on the road for 4 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. But if you had a train that I could take for an hour, now suddenly I'm in a train, I'm in Peter Mokaba for an hour, I watch the game. When I'm done, I get back on the train, I drive back. Now, there's tourism. Because when I now arrive in Peter Mokaba, I can spend money. Maybe I might think, maybe I must stay here, explore some of the lodges, go to Snake Park. You enhance economic activity like that. You also mean that when there's mining that takes place in Limpopo, you can move that. Have you ever been to Mpumalanga? Have you seen how beautiful Mpumalanga is?
That side of Mbombe.
God's window. Waterfall Honor, Waterfall Bofen. All those areas. Beautiful. Which tourist do you speak to who says, I'm going to Mpumalanga?
I've never had one.
Now you would incentivize it. But you create economic efficiency. Here's the other thing that you do. You know why there's shacks here? In Hammanskraal?
Yes.
Because you can't have urbanization by urban sprawl. You can't say to people, well, we'll grow Tshwane by just keep bringing more shacks and then we keep going. It's unsustainable. But if you had an effective train mechanism, it means somebody can sit and live in another part and travel in by fast train into the city and work and travel back. People do it in London, people do it in Zurich, people do it in Switzerland, people do it all over the world. In Japan, they do it all over the world. Why can't we do it here?
Okay.
Now the problem is if you don't have a vision and a funding model for it, everything is a priority. If everything is a priority, then nothing is.
So you speak more of some of the things that you will do to grow the economy. You mentioned at 5% is infrastructure. Whenever you look around us, the legacy that apartheid left, one of which happens to be infrastructure. A lot of universities, a lot of roads, a lot of bridges, a lot of skyscrapers, which now are collapsing, gradually becoming dilapidated. When you travel around Gauteng, you see some.
Let me stop you there, my brother, because infrastructure does not decay because of apartheid.
No, I'm saying it's a legacy that apartheid did great job in terms of infrastructure.
Oh, I see.
Yes, a lot of infrastructure that we have today is not the infrastructure that was built by us as black leadership, as black government. A lot of it is the infrastructure that was left by apartheid. And now a lot of it is becoming dilapidated. The traffic lights are not working. In some areas they're stealing the poles. When you travel around Johannesburg, even like trash, they're not collecting trash. What comes into mind whenever you travel around, you see all this chaos happening?
Who is the government?
It's the ANC.
So we must vote them out. It's a simple thing. When a government fails, you must vote it out. We must free ourselves from this idea that liberators will keep liberating us. The Kenyans say it best. At first we must be liberated, but then we must liberate ourselves from liberators. The problem is we tend to think that those who freed us are going to govern us. They fulfill their job. We need a new... I want to use the word cadre, but it has its own connotations. But we need a new cadre of governance. The city managers, CFOs, public service can't be self-enrichment. There are prescribes. You lose this for infrastructure maintenance, etc. We've built new infrastructure and neglected the other. So if you want to get this thing right, my brother, create a new leadership cohort, not political leadership only, but administrative leadership. Because at this point in time, it does not matter. I'm glad we have now a GNU and we've got all of these parties running government. But let me tell you what's important. Build a competent government. Because that government will survive anyone who comes. If you get the government of Mmusi Maimane, they must be able to ride that out. Figure out. We might arrive there and say, we're going to change the budget to spend on the things I've been talking about. Spend on education. Introduce more children to school. Look at maths and science as a priority. We're going to come into that. Now you need an administration that can execute on that. But if you have an administration that thinks that it was there to serve one party forever, you will end up with the policies of that party continued even after those people have died.
So, build one South Africa say, I haven't seen your political party in at VETS. Let me speak about VETS. I haven't seen that political party moving around campus, trying to recruit new members. What is your plan when it comes to, higher institution of learning in terms of reaching out?
Yeah, look, we've set up there a few students, maybe you haven't seen them here, who are BOSA youth people who are here at VETS. Henry Masuku, he's been here, he was a former VETS graduate. He was one of those who were involved with Fees Must Fall, etc., etc. So we are working on it. Our politics, resources, money, people, all of those things. But we will get there. I want to create a better presence here. I agreed to come and be interviewed here because I want to see us grow here at VETS.
Yes, sir. What is the plan for 2026?
We're working with multiple parties to create candidates, because local government is about candidature, getting the best candidates to work. And so we're working with a number of people to make sure that happens. We get it right, I think we'll be able to bring on the caliber of candidates that eventually you'll be able to go, I can vote for that guy. Because here's where democracy fails. Democracy says, we as a party, we're going to come and tell you. I am saying, no, you the people tell us. Because power to the people. If you say that, then you must give the people to choose the people they want to be. So there must be a candidate who comes from VETS. It's just that universities are hard because many of the students don't live in the ward that the university is in. They live elsewhere. And they vote elsewhere. But I want to encourage every student here, register to vote and vote. Because the problem is that students are under-registered to vote.
Did you see how last year the queues that were here when it comes to voting until 10 p.m.?
I'm appreciative of that, but as a national statistic, it's still fairly low. We are governed by grandfathers and grandmothers because we have failed to take the candidates ourselves and put them to stand for public leadership.
So whenever you sit at home and you are like, you know what, Mmusi Maimane, we have worked. What is it that you want to see happening at the country? Which status or which level of progress that you want to see the country at, and you will be like, wow, I've played my part in shaping South Africa?
I'm a Democrat. I want to see democracy work. I am an economist by heart. I want to see us, hey, we're wealthy, man. We're wealthy underground.
Yes.
I want to see a country where truly when we talk about one South Africa, there are no people left out. I'm sick and tired of living in a country where you travel here in Parktown, you see a different level of wealth, and then you leave straight from here, and you can go just down the road from here and see absolute poverty. That's not the South Africa I want to see. The South African problem is what do you do with the many that are left out? And so I want to build a country upon which all citizens can prosper, regardless of the color of their skin. I want to live in a country where women can walk around freely and safely without worrying that they are going to be violent. I want to live in a country where a child who is born does not get born into hunger, and that the circumstances of their birth will determine what kind of education they get. So Mmusi Maimane is going to, at the end of my life, see a level of governance that is godly, that brings ethical leaders to public service, that ensures the fact that actually this country truly resembles what God wants for this country to be. It's not a poor country, it's not a racist country, it's not a divided country, but a united, prosperous one. That's what I'm working towards. And so what I'm doing now in Parliament is not just playing politics. Even when they announced that the postponement of the budget, people stood up and were saying all sorts of things. What did I stand up and say? I said, let's remind ourselves, what are the laws of this country so that we stick to them. If you postpone a budget, give us a date immediately. And if you give us a date, let's work a timetable to make sure the budget is both legal. But here's the next most important thing. The budget as an instrument must be debated by the people. Give the people time to debate the issue. That's the legacy I want to leave in this country. Whatever office I occupy, may it be that you know that one day Mmusi will build a truly prosperous South Africa that is integrated as part of Africa. Because South Africa, man, is 60 million people. We are living in a continent of 1.4 billion people. I was in Europe last week. You know what their problem is? Their populations are declining. Their birth rates are going down. Which means they will have to look to Africa to help them in the future. They are going to. It's a fact.
Yes.
So we are the future. Africa is the future. Can you imagine one day if we were talking about a similar currency amongst African countries? Can you imagine if we had a rating mechanism that rates currencies here in Africa that is born in Africa, so we are not dependent on Moody's and anyone to tell us what it is? Can you imagine actually that, yes, we will have borders in Africa, but borders are strong so that when you arrive, we know where you are from, but we can adjudicate your visa electronically. Can we digitize the continent so that we are not standing in long lines to vote, as you were saying, but we can do it via blockchain? My brother, let's stop fixing the problems of my parents. Let us fix the problems of my children. That's the future. If I'm busy trying to organize, my parents are old. I love them. They suffer under apartheid. But there's a lot I can't fix for them. But I can fix for their grandchildren. I can make sure their children know. You know, when you travel a little bit, go to Qatar. Qatar is small. Yes. Small place. In 10 years, they've built cities that are incredible. They've got oil money. So yes, it's an advantage. We have minerals. What was the last city we built in this country? Imagine if we built the city. Let me give you are from Limpopo, so I'm going to build it between Gauteng and Limpopo. Build a city, mega city. So that people stop living in shacks in the periphery of the city.
Creating jobs just by building a city. My
brother, I long for that. It's just that we've always had a leadership who are busy debating things that you and I stop talking about.
What message do you have for young people who are from the rural areas, from the township? You are from a township yourself in Soweto. And whenever they look at you, they love you, they idolize you. But sometimes they don't know that you are from the same struggle. You are not born rich. You had to work through life. You had to work so hard to be where you are today.
I want to say to young people, let us build a country where hard work is rewarded. My mother was a cashier, my brother. She didn't work for most of my high school life. My father worked in a factory. They worked hard so that I could go to school and do it. Let's build a country where hard work is rewarded. So here's the deal I'm willing to make with young people. Yes. If you work hard, I will work hard to build a state that supports that. You know what broke my heart the other day and still does haunt me every day? A young woman was sharing a story about studying to be a doctor. And now she's unemployed. That broke. Because I know what it takes for a community to put their money together to help so that this young one must go to university. How many A's she had to get so that just to get qualified for university. Then after that, for her to be unemployed is a crime. The deal I want to make is, let's make sure hard work is rewarded. Because now we're living in a country where people think, hey, to be politically connected is the way forward. If you work hard, my brother, you pull your weight. Let's make sure you can get to the top. You don't need political connection. You need to prove yourself. I want to open the door so that if you compete and you win, you win. Fair. That's what it is for me. So that when people are lazy, they must feel the consequences of laziness. If you are lazy, you want to stay at home, you must feel the consequences of it. You must sit at home and if you want to smoke in your open and stay at home, that's what you're going to experience. But if you work hard, I want to build a country that will help you, that will make sure you get to the top, compete with anybody. So to young people, I want to learn from you, but I also want you to know, let's have a dialogue about how we work hard to achieve. Let's have ambition. Hey, this country breaks my heart. When I hear people say, Baba Pasaka 30%, I say, you are fulfilling for Wood's dream where he says townships will become dormitories of unemployment. Man, I love young people. Young people are brilliant. They just have been misled into believing if you are connected, you know where you're going to go, you're going to end up with connections. That's bullshit.
Say in closing, in a minute, I have two more questions briefly. What is the biggest myth that politics has sold us, or biggest lie? What is the biggest myth or biggest lie that religion has sold us?
Religion and politics, what lies have been told?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes. Can answer each separately.
On the politics, I would think the lie is that politicians are the messiahs. They are not. We are the ones we have been waiting for. It's up to you and I to make a difference in this country. The mistake we made in 94 is to think politicians are going to solve the problems. That's not. We surrendered. We said, oh, Mandela, all of them, you do your thing. We should have continued the activism. On the religious front, that God hates people.
Yes.
I will serve a God who is generous, loves people. I believe in a God of justice who's offended at poverty. I believe in a God who wants to see people thrive. And so I could feed you a religious lie that says, hell is what you must fear. But a lot of people respond to that to say, I'm living in hell here on earth. Why would I fear hell after he died? The truth is we must see heaven on earth. That's the truth we must tell. And that must be true for all. Because it is hell when a mother has to boil leaves to feed their children. It must offend Christians. So any pastor who doesn't preach about justice is only preaching a half gospel. If you want to preach the full gospel, preach a gospel of a God who, whilst they want a relationship with you, but it's not just you. You are part of a system. And the systemic sin that we must deal with. And therefore, I long for the day where when others are portraying a God of hatred, we can show a God who's generous and loving.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. I know you have a busy schedule. I will always cherish this moment for trying to squeeze me in your schedule. And I wish you all the best in your personal life, as a father, as a businessman, and as a politician too. I wish you all the best. And God bless
I want
you.
to convert you from wearing a red beret.
It's not me. It's the space that we have.
Come back home.
We have borrowed the space. It's not me.
Come back home
And we
and build
have borrowed the
together.
Space. Yes.
Amandla.
I want you to thank you so much.